So we're into week 3 of the second phase of the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. At the moment, only the 2-dose Pfizer jab is being given. Global stock shortages are a major worry, and while we're getting regular shipments of this particular vaccine, it's simply not enough. It's particularly frustrating because over 2 million doses of the single-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine sitting in fridges ready to leave the Aspen factory in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape. But those doses have been halted over safety concerns. This after a mix-up of batches at a manufacturer in Baltimore in the United States of America. Well, let's get to grips with this issue now. I'm joined by Professor Helen Rees, Chairperson of the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, SAHPRA. Prof, thank you so much for your time. When are the Johnson & Johnson vaccines going to be released from the Aspen factory?
Well, I think we have to go back a step from the Aspen factory. The problem has arisen not in the Aspen factory, but in the what's called the emergent manufacturing site in the United States. This was a site that was manufacturing both the J&J vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine. And what was discovered was that one batch of the J&J vaccine had some contamination. So that batch was destroyed. But what the Food and Drug the United States have done, and their language is out of an abundance of caution, is that they are now evaluating the batches around that batch. And in addition, J&J itself has been evaluating the batches around that batch to ensure that, that these lapses in manufacturing standards are not picked up in those batches as well. And as soon as we get that feedback, we'll be able to determine which batches are okay, and that will allow Aspen, who are manufacturing the J&J in this country, to proceed.
So are you saying that you have to wait for the FDA to give the all clear, even though those doses have been filled and finished here in South Africa, and that happened, I think it was sometime early in March they were done?
That's completely correct, because this is a manufacturing problem, and the FDA is the regulator who oversees a U.S. manufacturing site. So we are waiting for them to come back to us. It's not only us who's waiting, the World Health Organization is waiting. You know, many people are waiting for their determination. And this takes some time because it's a technical process to evaluate the vaccines, and it's accompanied by inspection of the manufacturing site. But as I say, J&J themselves are obviously equally concerned and have also been evaluating independently those batches.
So have you seen the safety data on the doses that are at the Aspen factory?
It's not safety data. When we talk about safety data with vaccines, that's an expression we apply for clinical concerns. What's happening at the Aspen factory is the manufacturing, what we call fill and finish. So that data, what they have received is from the US company. So what we need to see is the US data in the first instance. Some of the tests that are required are really extremely sophisticated, and the FDA and J&J have the capacity both to do this, and that's what they are currently doing. So everything swings on the FDA at the moment.
So are you saying that you can't put any pressure on the FDA? And the reason I'm asking this, Prof, is because it's actually been a really long time. This mix-up happened late February. We're now March, April, May. It's 3 full months on. Surely, do you have any relationship with the people at the FDA? Surely you can put some pressure on them.
Oh gosh, if we could put more pressure on, we would. But we do. You're quite right. We do have a relationship, and a good relationship, with key personnel, senior personnel in the FDA. And there have been regular meetings between the CEO and the senior staff at SAHPRA with these senior colleagues in the FDA. And indeed, we've been putting as much pressure as we can on the FDA, and they totally understand the urgency. The problem is that these processes in themselves take time. They're not, it's not like a litmus test where you dip and you take out and you can find. So that's been part of the problem. But indeed, we share the anxiety. We want to get this answered as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
and so we are putting
I want to jump in on that point, because I was reading a really interesting article in the New York Times on the 19th of May. And that article said that officials in the EU, Canada and South Africa, and those are the affected areas, are saying there's no sign their doses have been contaminated. Are you saying we don't know if our doses have been contaminated in Aspen? Are you saying we have no capacity to test those doses sitting in Gqeberha for whether they've been contaminated or not?
We have the capacity to test the vaccines for certain aspects of manufacturing, and we do that all the time. We do that with those batches. So that's not the problem. Before we receive a vaccine from another country, we have to get certification from the regulatory authority in that country that tells us that the manufacturing from their point of view and the testing of the vaccine from their point of view has been done up to standard. We then repeat the testing because obviously things can happen in transit, in storage, etc. So we will repeat the testing. The problem here is we're looking at very new vaccines which have got, we don't know quite what the contamination was because we haven't seen that yet for the batch that was affected. But we understand that it might well have been contamination that came from the other side of the factory where they're manufacturing AstraZeneca. Now, that kind of capacity to do that kind of testing for a brand new vaccine and a brand new virus really does rest with, the FDA and with J&J. And that's what we're waiting for. But similarly, you're quite right. The EMA, WHO, the Canadian regulator, we're all waiting on the same information. So South Africa's not alone in this. We all need that information from the regulator in charge of the manufacturing site.
So I understand that you say that this is quite a different sort of test from what you're saying, but you say you do repeat testing. Has any testing been done by J&J on this particular batch? And if so, what are they telling you about it?
They have been testing themselves, and they've also been testing the batches on either side. And they're in dialogue, obviously, with the Food and Drug Administration. They've been in dialogue with us. You have to be very cautious about saying what they found versus what the FDA, because they are doing independent testing.
Sure.
So I think we're hoping very much to get the testing results from the FDA later this week. And as soon as we get them, we will be releasing them. And I promise you, Sally, we are speaking to the FDA, I promised you, just about every day and every other day. And they are being extremely careful. They are testing this very, very carefully because they understand the importance.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. What is Johnson & Johnson saying about the batches? Are they saying the batches are fine? I'm just interested. I know that you're saying it's not the final word and you need independent verification. But what has Johnson & Johnson told you about those batches in Aspen factory?
No, I think that, unfortunately, these things are confidential.
Why?
So I'm not a...
I don't understand why, because here's the thing, there's all this abundance of caution, and I understand that, but we're looking at months and months of delays about something that went wrong in a factory in Baltimore. We're sitting in here in South Africa with 2 million doses on our doorstep, and because the FDA seems to be taking its time, we can do nothing.
I'm going to say again, the reason I am being cautious about what J&J says is that they're the manufacturer. The final word has to come from the FDA, and I don't want to put out information into the public domain that will say one thing and then the FDA might say something else, because that would just cause confusion.
But I would say the information is already out there, because according to this article, unless the article got it wrong, this New York Times article says officials, not Johnson & Johnson officials, officials in the EU, Canada and South Africa say there's no sign their doses have been contaminated. Are you saying that report maybe didn't get the facts correct?
We are talking to Canada and the EMA as well, and all of us, none of us are in a position to say that, because we do not have the information. If we had the information, my goodness, we would be using it straight away, one way or another, so that we can release these doses. We are incredibly anxious to do that. The information really has to come from the FDA. They are the definitive word on their testing, their inspections. They also look in what we call good manufacturing practice. That's all about inspection. So we are waiting for that, and we are pushing them and pressurizing.
But you can also do your own independent tests. And here's the thing. We know right now in the Free State, there are no vaccinations taking place in rural parts because of the problem of transportation around Pfizer. It requires extremely cold temperatures, as you know, and it's really creating problems in rural areas. Johnson & Johnson, at the moment, is the best option we have because it could be stored at a much easier temperature and it's a single dose. At what point will you, as the health products regulator of South Africa, say, you know what, FDA, we've got the batch of results from Johnson & Johnson. We've done our own testing. We're going for it. Would you ever do that?
Well, I'm going to repeat. Under our legislation, we have to get that license from the FDA. Has to give this clearance. And clearly, if everything was straightforward and a home run, you know, it would be a straightforward and a home run. And clearly, this isn't the case. This is complicated. And the regulator locally, we cannot say and put our hands on our heart and say, without testing, without the sort of technology that's required to test a brand new vaccine with contamination that is possibly related to a different vaccine, we don't have the capacity to do that. We are going to be reliant on the FDA. So we absolutely need this. Now, I think, Sally, an important question would be, if the FDA really were dragging their feet and really weren't doing anything, what would we do? We would escalate this. We would escalate it at every level we possibly could. And we have escalated this to the top level, and they are being very responsive. But I can honestly say what they are doing is they're doing the technical part of what has to be done. What we don't want to do is to say to people in the Free State, here's a vaccine, and then say, oh dear, we think there might be a problem. What we want to be able to assure everyone about is the vaccines that we approve are of a proper quality. So at the moment, our hands are tied, but we are hoping that by the end of this week, we will get this information from the FDA. And I'm going to say again, everyone is losing sleep over this, and everyone is pushing as hard as they can.
Did you say end of this week?
That's what we're hoping. That's the latest that we have been told is the end of this week.
That's potentially very good news. I have to ask you, while I have you, how close are we to approving other vaccines? I know that we've approved Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson with all the delays, and Moderna as well. I'm not sure, but I know that there's obviously vaccines from China, there's Sputnik from Russia, and even the Cuban vaccine. How far along in the process of approving them or even giving emergency use approval are we on those vaccines, and how soon might they be coming here?
Yeah, I think this is very important. So the first thing that is important for the public to understand is the regulator doesn't reach out to the manufacturers and say, please submit. They have to be at a point where they want to submit. So what SAPRA has done with the Department of Health is said to the Department of Health, as soon as you are in dialogue with any company where there might be a possibility that you want to purchase vaccines from this company, please ask them to register with SAPRA. So far, the companies that are in more advanced stage are Sinovac and Sputnik. Sputnik is undergoing what's called a rolling review, so they're continuously, as they get new data, they're putting it in to SAPRA. Sinovac, there's been a lot of dialogue with Sinovac, and again, we're getting from them all of the data that we require, and there's a lot of data that is required. So there's been a lot of discussion backwards and forwards, and we're moving forward with Sinovac and slowly with Sputnik as well. There are a number of people who have applied for registration of these vaccines. So both of those vaccines are underway in the review process.
We have heard, and this report came through sort of late last week, that some of the vaccination sites are actually putting on hold their plans to really scale up because they're worried there just aren't enough vaccines, which is an absolute tragedy if you think about it. When you look back at what SAPRA has done, do you feel you've failed the nation in any way?
No, on this one, and I would be honest, have we been learning on a steep learning curve? Certainly we have. But if I look at the vaccine side of things, and in fact all the therapeutics, and the clinical trials. SAPRA, from the outset, said we're going to prioritize this. If you look at the turnaround time for approval of clinical trials, the turnaround time, the dialogues with the vaccine manufacturers, many discussions, much feedback given. I think that we've really gone as far as we could. It's a two-way process, and I think that people must understand this. It's not just as simple as a small file that goes in. There's a lot of data that has to go in about manufacturing and the quality and the clinical data, the preclinical data and so on. And all of that has to be reviewed. And all of that has to be in place before even an emergency use can be given. So in as much as SAPRA has been on a learning curve and it has gone very quickly, so have many of the applicants. And I think we'd all acknowledge that people are learning, but pushing both sides. Everyone is pushing very rapidly. If I'm honest with you, Sally, I'm sure we're all going to look back and say, actually, could we have done anything better? I would say yes. But we're bound to say yes. There must be things that we could have done better, faster, and with hindsight in a different way. But I do think, and I'm the chair of the board, so I'm not actually the doer in this. But I want to take my hat off to the CEO and the SAPRA staff. I mean, they really have worked weekends, nights, new ways of doing things, getting external experts in to assist, new panels of people who are external academics. It has been a huge effort. And the result is that we have gone really very fast. If you're worried about, and of course we all are, does it appear to be slower for Sinovac? Sputnik, as I say, is a rolling review, so that's a bit different. That's been an iterative process between SAPRA and the applicant, backwards and forwards. Let's get this data. We need that data. That's missing. So that's been a process that has developed over time, and both parties have been very actively engaged in it. So that is why that appears to be slower than, say, Pfizer or J&J or AstraZeneca.
All right, well, I want to thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. I know you're really busy, and we really look forward to hearing from you before the end of the week. Let's hope that the FDA is really close to giving the green light on that Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and let's hope that it's all safe to proceed with. Thank you so much for your time. That was Professor Helen Rees, Chairperson of the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, SAPRA, telling us that those 2 million doses sitting in the factory in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape, once the FDA gives the all clear on safety on those doses, they can be released immediately. She's hoping to hear from the FDA by the end of the week.